Okay, obviously AM5 is right around the corner. September 29th is the launch date for the processor. So we're gonna talk about motherboards, because this is an area where if we kind of continue with the series of like overspending for computer components and like where you can obviously waste money, motherboards is certainly one of those areas. So today we're gonna kind of talk about the 3 levels of motherboard that they're launching with and which one's gonna be right for you based on the CPU maybe you plan on getting. The new H7 series from NZXT offers tempered glass side panels, toolless panel removal for easy installation, front and top side 360mm radiator support, and integrated cable management bar for clean cable installs. To see the complete feature set and variations of the H7 available, including the H7 Flow, follow the link in the description below. Okay, so there are 4 new processors coming out for AM5, at least at the time of launch. We've got a 7950X, 7900X, 7700X, and 7600X. 7800X is being reserved probably for the X3D versions of the stacked VRAM, or excuse me, Vcache. So we're not gonna talk about that one today, but obviously we've got a very big spread of core control, or core count, core quality, core speed, all that stuff. So the 7600X is a 6-core, 12-thread, and the 7950X is a 16-core, 32-thread. So a very big spread there. So as such, we've got 3 levels of motherboard. So we've got, for the first time with AMD's history of launching Ryzen, not only the 70 series, so I say 70 because we had X370, X470, X570 up until now. But now we have X670, which makes sense, but now we have an X670 Extreme. So you might be asking yourself, okay, well, what are the differences here? Now remember, on the new platform, we've got a lot of new stuff coming. We've got PCIe 5.0 being launched alongside with AMD's motherboards here. So that's gonna give you support for ultra-fast storage, which is also launching apparently in November of this year, I believe, is when we're gonna see PCIe Gen 5 storage devices, which will be able to take advantage of that bandwidth. You've got additional VRM over construction, if you will, because each of these motherboards is designed to handle up to 170 watts of socket power. Now, remember, we've got a 7950X with a TDP of 170 watts, but it's really gonna be pulling more than about 230 watts from the socket before you overclock it. There's a major difference between TDP and actual power draw. So we're not gonna get into that today, but we're gonna talk about why you might choose an extreme board over a standard board or the B650 board. So basically the differences of these motherboards is gonna be features that are either stripped out of it and or more robust or overbuilt. So obviously the X670 Extreme is gonna be the perfect motherboard for the 7900X or the 7950X if you are planning on overclocking. Now there's another function, fundamentally different feature set here from the X670 Extreme versus the X670, which I find kind of interesting, and let me explain why. It says extreme overclocking capabilities and most connectivity. Okay, so PCIe Gen 5, but it says PCIe Gen 5 support with 2 graphics slots and 1 storage slot. It's funny because Crossfire has not been something that AMD has really talked about or announced or even supported in quite a while. We have even shown how all the way back on the with the 5700 and 5700 XT, that we were able to sort of brute force enable Crossfire, but it wasn't doing anything. Like, only one card was doing anything. So the fact that they are explicitly calling out 2 graphics slots here, and considering the fact that these are not really being marketed as productivity boards, has me wondering if maybe AMD is gonna maybe try and push some implicit and explicit Crossfire again. It'd be nice to see, but we all know devs haven't been taking advantage of that. So already, if you're not planning on running multiple graphics cards, whether it be for a dedicated rendering card or a dedicated streaming card or any sort of productivity or 3D modeling, then the X670 Extreme is already not gonna be interesting to you. What you're probably gonna see on these motherboards is quite a few slots when it comes to PCI expansion. But you'll probably, like this says, PCIe Gen 5.0 support for 2 graphics slots. So that means there's gonna be 2 PCIe Gen 5 full 16X Gen 5 slots is what I'm assuming. And then when it says 1 storage slot, you're probably gonna see a PCIe Gen 5 8X or a 4X on there for the storage. And obviously with being 8X or 4X means you're not gonna get the full bandwidth of 5.0 for graphics because that's 16X. So you're probably gonna see 2 PCIe Gen 5 16X and 1 8X or 1 4X. And then some probably PCIe Gen 4 slots below that. The X670 supports enthusiast overclocking with PCIe 5.0 support for one storage slot with one optional graphics support. So that's an interesting one. But remember, don't take PCIe Gen 5 graphics into account here, because we know the next gen graphics cards are more than likely gonna be PCIe Gen 5.0. We're currently on 4.0 now with 6000 series Radeon cards as well as 3000 series NVIDIA cards, but they are not anywhere near saturating PCIe Gen 4, so Gen 5 should not be really that big of a concern for you. Running your current graphics cards and even next gen 5.0 cards in a PCIe Gen 4 will be perfectly fine. Trust me, it's not gonna be an issue that's even somewhat tangible. In fact, when we were testing Gen 3 slots and Gen 4 cards, when 3000 series first came out with NVIDIA, like the 3090, on an older Gen 3 board, we were seeing, if we were able to overclock the graphics card high enough to where we weren't seeing any sort of bottlenecking at 1080p, we were seeing a difference of like 1.5% to 2% max. So don't take the graphics into account there. But some of the other things that you're gonna notice here that are available on these boards, and all of them, all the way down to the B550, and by the way, the B550 is more their mainstream board. This has a feature set that's gonna be probably on par with like an X570 board, but it's obviously gonna be more affordable when it comes to AM5. It's designed primarily for performance users delivering excellent PCIe 5.0 storage support. So you can see really their emphasis here on the 3 different boards is all about graphics and storage support. PCIe Gen 5 graphics, not a huge thing to consider at the moment. If you're gonna be running PCIe Gen 5 storage, then yeah, you're gonna want PCIe Gen 5 slots. However, they all support PCIe 5.0, up to 14 super speed USB connections. That's actually kind of nice to see. And that's because of the fact that the Ryzen CPUs have so many lanes versus something like on Intel. Next generation Wi-Fi connectivity with 6E. So it has Wi-Fi 6E support. It's up to the motherboard manufacturer to actually implement it. The nice thing is most motherboards we've been seeing now, in fact, our motherboards that we were using here, we were quite shocked. When we were doing the studio renovation, we had to use Wi-Fi for a little bit because we were disconnected wired to our original office as this room was being built, and we had to go wireless. We were going through several walls, and we didn't even realize that our wireless router was 6E until we did a speed test on our wireless, built into our motherboards, by the way, not a wireless card, just built-in motherboard wireless. We were getting like 940 megabits with about a 7 to 10 millisecond ping. So the only way we were even able to notice that we were on wireless was we had a few millisecond ping higher than we were used to. So having 6E is actually a nice fallback to have if something happens with your wired connection. I know a lot of people say, oh, screw wireless, wireless. Trust me, wireless is nice to have if you're in the middle of having some sort of a wired crisis. Whether it's our switch died or a cable got cut or damaged or something, having a wireless fallback is nice. We literally were able to keep running during the renovation because of the wireless. Now, again, it's up to motherboard manufacturers to implement it. I do believe wireless 6E or Wi-Fi 6E has gotten cheap enough to where it's being implemented and installed on more of the higher end boards, because again, it's an added cost to the motherboard. Supports existing AM4 cooling solutions. So all these motherboards are going to support AM4 coolers, which is nice because that means obviously they've kept the Z-axis height, the height of the CPU the same. It's not like Intel where they changed the spacing of the mounts, but also the height of the Z-axis height of the CPU. Like we know 12th gen is taller than 11th gen and older, which was causing problems trying to use older coolers, even though they mounted up with the holes. They were putting too much tension on their CPU and causing memory and USB dropouts and stuff. So that's kind of nice to see. It means if you're currently on AM4 and you're planning on upgrading, then you don't have to upgrade your cooler, which is nice to see. Obviously, if you're planning on upgrading your CPU, you need a new motherboard because AM5 is a completely different socket. Why are these boards so expensive though? That's the thing that a lot of people are upset about, both with Intel and AMD, is it seems like as the processor technology was getting more competitive, right? AMD and Intel right now are in a fierce CPU battle, which is awesome because the consumer is winning in that situation where at least for the same price, you're getting more for it. More cores, more cache, more clock speed. And if you're getting all of that for the same amount of money, then you're obviously getting a better deal or better value. But with support for higher core counts and higher TDPs and higher clock speeds, the board needs to be more robust. So you're finding manufacturers are starting at the top by building these crazy over-spec'd, overbuilt, over-VRM'd motherboards because, well, they can get more for their money. It doesn't cost them nearly as much more to manufacture the extra components or the extra feature sets on the board as they can charge you extra for the board. So what I mean is, if you could get like a B5 or B550 board for $100 and it meets your needs, sure, it doesn't have a ton of PCIe slots, doesn't have Wi-Fi 6 built in, may not even have wireless built in at all. There's a very basic sound card built in that you're probably not planning on using anyway, because maybe you have a USB DAC or something like that. Those feature sets don't matter to you. But if they were to build a $500 board or a $700 motherboard that has all these bells and whistles, it doesn't cost them $400 more to build that board. It costs them maybe an additional $100, $150 more to build that board, and it's $200, $250 of profit because of the fact that they are enticing you with a lot of features that you may not even need. So if early adopters are willing to adopt the more expensive boards and the early adoption cost of going with a new platform, it's kind of a profiteering move where the manufacturers will build a motherboard that's really overspec'd and really overbuilt from the top of the stack down. That way the early adopters are helping them recoup the cost of building these motherboards by having those people pay the extra prices, and then later on they will get mainstream adoption by coming out with the more reasonable $100, $150, maybe $250 motherboards. I find most people are willing to spend about $200 to $250 for a motherboard on a fairly mid to high range system. Like $1,000 motherboards, $2,000 motherboards that we've seen exist is kind of ridiculous. In fact, we've got one out in the shop that we've never even used. It's a Asus Glacier, I believe it is, Z690 Glacier for Intel, and it's like a $2,000 motherboard or something like that. I never used it because I was like, this is insane. This does not need to exist. But the boards that are already shown, that are gonna be coming out here, X670E, so if you see the E designation, that means extreme. X670E Tai Chi, that's an ASRock board. The Asus ROG Crosshair X670E Extreme. The E already means extreme, so why are you putting... The ROG Crosshair X670E Extreme. The BioStar X670E Valkyrie. The Gigabyte X670E Aorus Extreme. Guys, you don't need to put the word extreme in there when the E designation already means it's extreme. It's extremely stupid. Okay, MSI Meg X670E Ace.
Also called extreme. That's what Ace stands for.
Also called extreme. Yeah, hey, good one, Phil. If you're going with something like, and you know what's funny how the flagship AM5 motherboards, they're not even talking about the non-extreme. They're not even talking about the B650. It's because they want to debut their highest end, right? It's unfortunate, but you know, it is what it is. They're designed to support 7000 series processors. I still feel like if you're on the fence about upgrading or adopting AM5 and you want to wait a little bit for initial BIOS support, because that's the other thing. Bleeding edge tech means you're the early adopter of something brand new. I guarantee AM5 is going to have day one launch issue of some sort. It's going to be some sort of game that won't launch, or some sort of game that absolute crashes, or some RAM configuration isn't going to work because it hasn't been necessarily vetted or discovered yet. You're gonna have existing DDR5 modules that are like currently tuned to DOCP with AM4 and then XMP with Intel, and you have a new platform that hasn't been vetted, or you're gonna have someone use that RAM. It's gonna happen because that's just what happens every time a new family is launched. If you're not one of those people that's willing to be a part of the wide testing, wait a few months, get yourself a mid-range B650 board and a 7600X if you're running an older platform. I guarantee this will be like the killer combo. The 7600X with a B550 motherboard that doesn't have all the bells and whistles that you don't need, and whatever the highest end graphics card you can afford, whether you're waiting for Navi 3 or you're waiting for 40 series or whatever it may be, that will be like a killer system for probably right around $1,500, and it will be an absolute powerhouse. I cannot wait to build that system that I'm talking about right now and comparing it to some of the older high-end, like the 10900K or the 11900K with like a 2080 Ti. I can't wait to compare what you can buy theoretically today for just a little bit more than the cost of a 2080 Ti at launch. That's gonna be an amazing, fun video to do. I wish I'd given more information and shown a little bit more of the B650 stuff. See, I keep saying 550, 650 is weird to say. AMD is on the path of greatness right now as far as I'm concerned, especially with this platform. But they have to stop. I've read a lot of comments about the 7000 series processors and stuff, and yes, as a whole, they have gotten more expensive. I don't know if the manufacturing cost has gotten that much higher, but they've definitely got more expensive. Remember when the 1800X launched at $500, people were like, oh my God, a $500 AMD motherboard, or a CPU, this is stupid, because they were coming from FX, where it was super cheap because there was no value, there's no performance there, therefore the value was extremely low. Now we're looking at $700 CPUs. But if you compare what you get for $200 more today, almost 7 years later from 1800X, you're getting the performance. You're getting way more performance overhead than you are with the extra cost. But still, there's cost involved. Kind of curious to see why they're specifically talking about 2 graphics card supports, because that's gotta be for something with productivity. But this isn't their productivity line. That's what's weird about this. So I'm curious to see, because we do know we need new Threadripper. New Threadripper needs to happen too, and I'm curious to see what they have in store for that, considering the fact that these motherboards are already, and these graphics, or these processors are already basically gonna destroy any 1000 and 2000 series Threadrippers that are out there. I mean, we're still on 3000 here, at least Phil is, and it's due for an upgrade. But anyway, don't overspend. Don't buy into the glamour of the super high-end motherboards, because I can tell you right now, you could take the most expensive motherboard on the market and the most budget motherboard on the market, and if you really do a checkbox on each one that has feature sets that you need, depending on what CPU you're running, you would never notice the difference, other than the fact that there's less money in your bank account at the end of the day. And I think that's something worth considering. So we'll test this when we get motherboards from various brands. I'm gonna put out some specific requests saying, please send us your cheapest boards, like your absolute cheapest, because I really want to see what the cheapest 7000 series rig is that we can buy and build, and compare it to some of the mid and high-end systems that exist today. Anyway, are you gonna be adopting AM5? Are you gonna wait for some of the bugs to be worked out? There's gonna be day one bugs, I've already talked about it. There's gonna be BIOS revisions. There's always tons of BIOS revisions in the first quarter of a new platform. You might even see some new microcode stuff potentially happening. I mean, obviously there's gonna be Windows power profiles that are gonna have to be updated and stuff and tweaked for the new system. Remember how you couldn't even run 12th gen on non-Windows 11 without, it just couldn't make sense of the E-cores. It didn't know what to do. So you were forced into Windows 11 update, which you more than likely are gonna be also forced into Windows 11 with AM5. If you're currently not, probably be ready for that. Anyway, I'm curious as to what your adoption plans are. Are you gonna wait and see? Are you gonna run out on day one because this is finally the platform that AMD has won you back? Or are you just a diehard Intel fanboy that will absolutely never consider the competition regardless? Even if that's you, you still win with this because Intel has to respond with something just as amazing. All right guys, thanks for watching. Sound off down below. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.